Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching.
Good evening, friends. We're ready to start. If folks can take their seats.
Welcome, good evening. I'm Diane Pinderhughes, a member of the faculty of the Departments of Political Science and Africana Studies. It's my honor to welcome you this evening. We have a lot of welcomings and introductions, so I'm going to go quickly. When Chair of Theology Tim Matavina invited me in 2019 as Chair of Africana to join him in planning this visit of the Black Catholic Theological Symposium's 31st annual meeting on the Notre Dame campus, things were different. I've stepped down as chair. My colleague Mark Sanders, who's here, is now interim chair of the department. Tom Burrish was provost, and will be greeted in a few minutes by a relatively new provost, Marilyn Miranda. Then, of course, COVID came along and upended all our planning and expectations. But thank goodness we've persisted, most of us, and the meeting is finally beginning, so welcome. This is my first face-to-face event in 18 months. So I want to thank the planning committee for this event on campus, which includes colleagues I'll call on and ask to be recognized for all their work and support. So Professor Steve Batten is here. I just saw him. There he is. Faculty member in theology, Professor Father Paulinus Odazor, who's here in theology and Africana studies. Reverend Dr. Professor Hugh Page from the Department of Theology and Africana Studies, as well as Vice President and Associate Provost for Undergraduate Affairs. I don't know if he's here, but he will be around, I would imagine. Mr. Eric Stiles, who's Rector of Carroll Hall as of 2016. And last but not least, Deacon Mill Tardy, first-year academic advisor. I know he's here, College of Arts and Letters, and deacon of the Diocese of Fort Wayne and South Bend. So thank you.
Good evening, friends. I'm Timothy Matavina, the chair of the Department of Theology. Thank you all very much for being here. And thanks especially to our colleagues from the Black Catholic Theological Symposium. An honor to have you on campus. We've been waiting a long time now to hear Dr. Copeland tonight and really looking forward to it and to other opportunities to have encounters with our BCTS colleagues over this weekend. Thank you so much for coming to meet on our campus, honoring us with your presence. I want to extend some thanks as well on behalf of the Department of Theology, Department of Africana Studies, to the co-sponsors for the events of these days. They are the College of Arts and Letters Institute for Scholarship in the Liberal Arts, Henkels Lecture Fund, the Cushwa Center for the Study of American Catholicism, thank you, Professor Cummings, Campus Ministry, the Initiative on Race and Resilience, headed by Professor Mark Sanders, already introduced and with us, the Institute for Advanced Study, the McGrath Institute for Church Life. And I also want to thank the conference center coordinators from the College of Arts and Letters, Lori Roberts, Kristen Garvin Podell, for all their logistical work. A few little housing announcements. First, there is another lecture tomorrow, Bishop Edward Braxton at 4:30 in this very same room, 4:30 tomorrow. And on Saturday at 5 o'clock, Cardinal Wilton Gregory will preach and preside at the Mass, the Eucharist, in the Basilica of the Sacred Heart, 5 o'clock Saturday, the first African-American cardinal in the history of the Catholic Church. We're very honored he'll be with us. There is a book sale going on now, and afterwards it will also be available to sell the books of Dr. Copeland and also a new book of Bishop Braxton, our other speaker who will be here. Another speaker will be here tomorrow. And that will take place at a reception following Dr. Copeland's lecture, which is in that white tent right over there. For COVID reasons, the reception has been moved to the tent. It's a very nice tent. Dignitaries that come to football games use that tent. So I want you to feel like you're really being treated with great hospitality. So I'm going to ask you from now, I know after Dr. Copeland's talk, we're all going to want to speak with her. If we could please all move to the tent, have a glass of wine together, and hopefully we can also, have Dr. Copeland come on over and be there to greet those of you that want to speak with her and congratulate her after the talk. So the tent right after the talk is over tonight. Thank you again for being with us.
And then my next task is to introduce our provost, Marilyn Miranda. Provost Miranda is the 5th provost of Notre Dame, since the role was created in 1970. She began the role formally on July 1st, 2020, but because of COVID, she was meeting and engaging with outgoing Provost Burrish, faculty. She met with a number of faculty groups by late spring of 2020, well before her official role began, so we thank her for that. Dr. Miranda is a scholar of environmental and public health and how the environment shapes health and well-being among children, an important, obviously a very important role. She founded the Children's Environmental Health Initiative, which is committed to fostering environments where all people can prosper. She earned her PhD and MA from Harvard University and is a Phi Beta Kappa, summa cum laude graduate of Duke University. So I'm very pleased and honored to be able to introduce Provost Marilyn Miranda, who will offer her welcome to the BCTS, to our speaker, and to this audience this evening. Thank you.
So it's nice to speak. Oh, I guess I can take this off. It's nice to speak after Diane because I don't have to lower the microphone. Usually I have to speak after Shannon Cullinan, who's a foot taller than I am. So thank you very much for that very kind introduction. On behalf of the University of Notre Dame, welcome to the 31st annual meeting of the Black Catholic Theological Symposium. It is, without question, a deep honor for us here at the University of Notre Dame to once again serve as host of this meeting. To Father Maurice Nutt, convener, and the officers and members of the symposium, I thank you for trusting the university, especially the Department of Africana Studies and the Department of Theology, along with our many co-sponsors. I thank you for trusting the university to collaborate with all of you on this event. Tonight is the symposium's first public lecture, and it's great to have Notre Dame faculty, students, and staff, as well as our friends from the South Bend Elkhart region here, joining us tonight to hear from Dr. Shawn Copeland, the Professor Emerita of Theology at Boston College, I'm running all my words together, I'm sorry. At Boston College on the subject of Black Lives Matter as public theology. So welcome back to Notre Dame, Dr. Copeland. We look forward to hearing from you and learning from you tonight. One of the things that I have already learned is that, like me, Dr. Copeland is from Detroit. That's how I know this is going to be a great evening. I already know it. So is there anybody else here who's from Detroit? And like, when you say you're from Detroit, are you really from Detroit, or are you from the suburbs of Detroit? Because we are from Detroit. Okay. All right. So I grew up brown in a mostly Black, mostly Catholic neighborhood in Detroit at a time when brown wasn't yet a word that we used. There was only black and white. And I went to this little Catholic school, So those of you who are from Notre Dame know that I'm a data scientist, and so I, of course, took the time to look up the census data from 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010 to make sure the way that I remembered my neighborhood is correct, and it's good, it is correct. So it was, my neighborhood was, according to the US Census, was 89% Black when I was growing up there. And so I went to this little grade school that was mostly Black also. And when it was time for me to go to high school, I won this scholarship from the Archdiocese of Detroit that allowed me to go to any high school I wanted to in Detroit. That was just amazing for me and for my family. And I made my decision about which high school to go to. This is how you know how nerdy I am. So I really, really wanted to study Latin. And all the boys' high schools offered Latin. And there wasn't a single girls' school that offered Latin. Except one high school said that if you come here, we'll find someone to teach you Latin. So they went into an old coat closet and pulled out Sister Lucia Wagner. She was tinier than I am to teach me Latin, so I went to a high school called Birmingham Marian. And when I arrived there, I was surprised given the neighborhood that I grew up in and the school that I went to, I was really surprised to find out that most Catholics weren't Black. You know, I know you're wondering, how is she a scholarship student? How did that happen? You know, so then I went from high school in the suburbs of Detroit. I went to college down in North Carolina, and again, making you wonder, you know, how I ended up becoming provost at Notre Dame. When I went to college, I was surprised to learn that because I'd grown up in this mostly Black, mostly Catholic neighborhood. I went to school in the suburbs of Detroit at a Catholic high school. Almost everybody I knew was Catholic. I moved to North Carolina to go to college, where I was surprised to learn that there were a lot of people who weren't Catholic. Okay. And then so now I'm learning, and I actually took a bunch of religion classes when I was in college. I was a math major, but I took a bunch of religion classes when I was in college because I was going to get to the bottom of all of these discoveries I was making. And then I went to graduate school in Boston, although when I was in graduate school, I preferred to call it gradual school. I went to graduate school in Boston, and so I grew up in the Archdiocese of Detroit, and if you know much about the history of the American Catholic Church, I ended up in the Archdiocese of Boston, where I discovered that going to church in Boston was really different from going to church in Detroit, right? And that was another discovery for me. And then I went back to North Carolina for my first faculty job. I was really delighted to get a job at the place where I had my alma mater at Duke. And while I was there, I attended this Black Catholic church that was on the grounds of North Carolina Central University. Just a beautiful stone church. It was, I just loved it there. And so as you can imagine, attending church there was quite different, arriving from Boston, attending church at a Catholic church on the grounds of a historically Black college. It was really different also. So all of these experiences led me to spend a lot of time thinking about, so it's allergies for me too, led me to spend a lot of time thinking about where people lived, whom they lived with and around, where they went to church, and how those church experiences differed, even if they were all Catholic churches, right? And in fact, now the focus of my research is on the impacts that continuing racial residential segregation has on health and educational and well-being outcomes, particularly amongst children. So that notion that within one church, we are all experiencing something different is what excites me most about this conference. So Blacks, as I had a conversation with Diane Pinder-Hughes about this earlier, so Blacks have been Catholic for a long time, but they're certainly not the largest portion of Catholics, right? But their numbers are significant in some locations. Certainly where I grew up, their numbers were quite significant. There are other places, oh, you're so kind. There are other places where their numbers are quite significant as well. But in general, that's not well understood by the average person. I don't think it's well understood by the average Catholic. I don't know that it's that well understood by the average Christian. And I don't know that that's well understood here at Notre Dame or more broadly. So having this conference here is very special for us at Notre Dame. It is a deep honor for us to host this conference at Notre Dame. The symposium presents an exciting opportunity for dialogue, for reflection, and connection, for fulfilling the symposium's 43-year mission of fostering an ethical community of scholarly dialogue characterized by a commitment to the fundamental humanity of all people, a regard for the plurality of cultural, ethnic, and religious backgrounds, and the development of an authentically Black and Catholic theology. It's more important than ever that we engage in conversations like these to listen to those who haven't always been heard and better understand how we can be good partners in creating and maintaining welcoming environments where people can bring their whole selves and their best selves to worship, to service, to learning, to their workplaces, to all that we do. So again, my thanks to the Black Catholic Theological Symposium for coming to the University of Notre Dame, to all of you for being here this evening, and thank you as well for the privilege and the honor of offering welcoming remarks this evening.
We want to give you a little Black Catholic Church experience. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Oh, give God praise on this evening. Oh, I know we're in a lecture. Hallelujah. But it wasn't for the Lord on our side and bringing us through these last 2 years of planning. The Holy Spirit has truly brought us together on this night. I want to just thank again the hospitality of the University of Notre Dame. Everyone has been so welcoming. My new BFFs are Dr. Tim Matvina and Eric Stiles. We've been planning this for 2 years, and so they've become my new BFFs over these last 2 years. And so we are just excited and ecstatic to be here on this evening. So my job is really tonight is to just introduce our convener. I am Dr. Kimberly Limemore. I am the associate convener, but our convener is Reverend Dr. Maurice Nutt. He is our convener of the BCTS. Would you welcome him, please?
Thank you so very much, Dr. Limemore. What a blessing it is to be here on holy ground, holy Catholic ground, I'm told. So great to be here in Notre Dame. It is our African and African-American tradition that when a younger person dares to stand up and speak, he seeks permission. And so I would like to receive permission from, and we're very blessed to have as our keynote speaker, Dr. M. Shawn Copeland, but she is also the elder member among us. She is a charter member of the Black Catholic Theological Symposium. Amen? She was there in 1978 when we were founded. So, Dr. Copeland, if you would please do me the honor of standing, and may I have your permission on behalf of the BCTS to speak, and may I have your blessing? May the words of your mouth and the meditation of your heart be acceptable in the sight of our God. Amen, Ashe. I would like to also acknowledge all the members of the Black Catholic Theological Symposium. You will meet them during the reception. Most of our members are here. I would ask that all those, even the new members, to please stand now and be recognized by our hosts here at Notre Dame. I would be remiss if I didn't do, before my short presentation, a few shout-outs to my Notre Dame friends, to Father Paulinus, to Dr. Batten, to my new good friend, Dr. Kathy Cummins-Sparrow, who had me present my Thea Bowman book for her class. So I'm so happy to see her. Oh, hey, Hallie, I see you too, one of our students. She said, don't forget me. And to the president of the Black Catholic Clergy Caucus, Deacon Mel Tardy. Deacon Tardy. I would also like to honor two women of Notre Dame who were my professors. Sister Dr. Kathleen Cannon and my mentor and during my doctoral studies at Aquinas Institute of Theology, my dear friend, Sister Dr. Mary Catherine Hilkert. My dear friends, since our establishment 43 years ago, the Black Catholic Theological Symposium has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to the foundational humanity of all persons, regard for the plurality of culture ethnic backgrounds and religious experience among Black peoples, and the development of a theology that is irrefutably and unapologetically, may I say unashamedly, authentically Black and truly Catholic. That's what we stand for, sharing our experience of our God. I would like to thank in a special way our Provost here at Notre Dame, for Dr. Miranda. Thank you for your insights, and it's good to know that you are a Detroit young lady, so thank you so much. To Dr. Tim Matoavina, I want to just thank you, and to my good friend I've known for a while, Eric Stiles, for being there throughout. You have been there every step of the way in helping us to plan, and we really, truly appreciate it. I want to thank, in a special way, Dr. Penderhughes for her encouragement and her sponsorship as well. Whenever the Black Catholic Theological Symposium meet, we just don't want to come and receive. It is mutual sharing. And so it's important for us to give as we have received, and we have truly received in abundance. And I would like to call members, Dr. Nate Samuel and Dr. Kathleen Dorsey-Bello, as well as Dr. Limor, to come forward for a presentation. We would like to present, it's always our custom to leave a piece of artwork, African American artwork, to our host parties. And in a special way, I would ask that if Dr. Penderhughes would come forward, and Dr. Matoavina, would he please come forward as well? The two pieces of art that we're about to present, this one of the Madonna is to the Department of Theology. We want to thank you. Both these two prints were done by Margaret Burrow, the founder of the DeSalvo Museum in Chicago. We ask that you please hang them up in your departments as a reminder that we were here, so that you may never, ever forget our presence and our prayers and our thoughts and our solidarity with the University of Notre Dame. It's all right to clap. I also have to, even though he's across the street at St. Mary's College, give a shout out to my good friend, Father Dr. Dan Horan. I see you here. God bless you. At this moment, we will now have the one who will give the introduction to our keynote speaker tonight. It's always nice when your student, your mentor, can come forth and speak about his teacher. I would like to introduce Mr. Byron Watry. And Mr. Watry is a PhD student in systematic theology at Boston College and has been a mentee of Dr. Copeland. Won't you now receive him?
Oh, what a blessing. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to talk about my teacher. As a first-year student at MDiv student at Candler School of Theology, that's the first time I encountered Dr. Copeland. And I encountered her in the way that many of us do, through her work. We read chapter 3 of In Flesh and Freedom. And I was amazed, I was astounded, I was awestruck. I came to Candler thinking I was going to do Bible. And after reading, after seeing someone do Catholic theology in an authentically Black way, I couldn't think of anything else to do. This was my life's calling, to systematics. And I'm not alone. For many of my seminary peers, future pastors in the United Methodist Church, in the Baptist Church, in the Episcopal Church, and Protestant churches across this country, Dr. Copeland was their first encounter with a Roman Catholic systematic theologian. And as I encounter more and more Black scholars across the academy, millennial scholars in particular, I'm told more and more that Dr. Copeland, not Ronner, not Balthazar, not Chauvet, not Metz, not even Lonergan. You know we love Lonergan at Boston College. But it's Copeland. Copeland is their first encounter with the Catholic theological intellectual tradition. Professor Copeland is Professor Emerita of Boston College in the Systematic Theology Department and the Africana, the African American Diaspora Studies Department program. She earned a PhD in Systematic Theology from Boston College. And before returning back to BC in 2003 as a faculty member, she taught, we had her on loan, at St. Norbert's College and Yale Divinity School and Marquette University, but she knew her home. She came back to BC. And for 12 years, she also served as an adjunct faculty for the Institute for Black Catholic Studies at Xavier University of New Orleans, our only historically Black college in the United States. I'm a proud graduate of an HBCU, Stillman College. Xavier sends more doctors. The majority of America's Black doctors are graduates of Xavier University. Your work, Dr. Copeland, at Xavier is so important, and I ask you all, if you want to give reparations, give to Xavier. Give to Xavier. But Dr. Copeland has done so much. She's received numerous awards for her work. Barry University gave her the Yves Congar Award for Excellence in Theology. That's just one. The Black Religious Scholars Group for the American Academy of Religion, our major national guild, gave her the Distinguished Scholars Award. And the Catholic Theological Society of America gave Dr. Copeland our highest honor, the John Courtney Maury Award. All that's fine and nice, but what I love about Dr. Copeland the most is her absolute devotion to the Roman Catholic Church. Dr. Copeland and I both attend the same church, St. Catherine Drexel Parish in Roxbury, Massachusetts. And every year we have a major Martin Luther King celebration. The Cardinal comes, it's a big deal. And Dr. Copeland is never where you think she would be. She's normally in the back, in the kitchen, cooking grits. Cooking grits, serving people. That's what she does best. Serve, and serve with a deep and abiding Catholic faith. I am so excited, so pleased, so honored to introduce tonight's speaker. We're in for a treat. Please open your minds, open your hearts, and please open your ears as we welcome Dr. M. Shawn Copeland. Well,
I thought someone else who wrote to me was assigned to introduce me tonight, and it's okay. And I'm thrilled that Byron did it. But what I was going to say, whether he introduced me or not, is that Byron got up yesterday at about 4:30 to pick me up at 5 o'clock in the morning to drive me to the airport. Truly, I mean, I couldn't be more grateful. I wanted to, whether you were interested, I didn't know this until tonight, but I knew that I was going to say how grateful I am that you were kind enough, generous enough to do that, So, thank you to all of you for being here, first of all. There are many places that one can be. I see Hugh Page back there. Thank you to all our colleagues in theology and in African American studies from the University of Notre Dame who are here this evening with us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you as well to the Reverend Dr. Maurice Nutt, who's the convener of the Black Catholic Theological Symposium, and all the officers of the symposium for their diligent and caring work for all of us in the society during this past year, which we have this word we all use now, unprecedented. So it has been an unprecedented year in time. I also want to thank Dr. Kimberly Limor for inviting me to give this public lecture. My thanks to Dr. Pinder Hughes. Is that good? Okay, thank you. My thanks to Dr. Pinder Hughes. It's a pleasure to meet Provost Miranda, Detroit homegirls. And so I can say now that, it's Diana, Aretha, Marilyn, and me, We're all from Detroit. I also want to thank in a special way Professor Timothy Matavina, who I've known for a long time. And we've done a lot of things together and been through a lot together. And so I want to thank you for welcoming us and supporting us here. I thank you also, Eric Stiles, rector of Carroll Hall, who's a stalwart friend of the BCTS and a stalwart friend of the formation of Black Catholic theology. So let me move along so that we can get to being outside and drinking wine. Jesus says this will be a good thing, don't worry. The wine. Like Provost Miranda, I'm having allergies here, but I've been working on some homeopathic cures here, but we'll see what happens. So, Black Lives Matter as public theology. This lecture proposes and interrogates the movement Black Lives Matter as a performative public theology, which, through critique, organizing, advocacy, protest, and love, affirms and testifies to the lives and survival, flourishing and beauty of Black human beings. There are 3 sections that comprise the lecture. The first identifies some of the representative figures in the emergence and development of this genre of theological reflection in academic circles. Second, and because public theology appeared during a particularly fertile time, it's important to distinguish it from theologies of liberation and political theology. The second part turns to the Black Lives Matter movement and reviews its genesis and priorities. And the third sets out an understanding of appreciation and interpretation of Black Lives Matter as a performative public theology, a poetics of testimony. So the emergence of public theology. In the United States, notions of public theology resonate with the work of Shaler Matthews, Walter Rauschenbusch, John A. Ryan, Howard Thurman, Reinhold Niebuhr, John Courtney Murray, and Martin Luther King Jr. More proximately, the term public theology derives from the work of 3 thinkers. Sociologist of religion Will Herberg, who in 1955 introduced the term civic religion. Secondly, there's sociologist Robert Bellah, who in 1967 pioneered the controversial notion of an American civil religion. And finally, church historian Martin Marty, who generally is credited as the first to use this term, public theology, and the term public theologians. He did this in 1974. However, social ethicist Max Stackhouse contends that the term public theology was first used in correspondence between Murray and Niebuhr. Now, whether or not Murray and Niebuhr first used the term, it's true that Marty elaborated it in an effort to, quote, distinguish his interpretations of persons and features within the Christian tradition in the US from understandings of civil religion held by Bella and others. Now, not long after Marty starts to use this term in the mid-70s, David Hollenbach called for the, quote, formulation of a public theology which attempts to illuminate the urgent moral questions of our time through explicit use of the great symbols and doctrines of the Christian faith, close quote. David Tracy joined this expanding conversation, declaring in the Analogical Imagination that all theology is public discourse, and identifying, as you probably remember, those of you who are doing doctoral work and study in theology right now, there are three distinct publics whom a theologian addresses: the academy, the church, and society. So what is public theology? A definition of public theology is difficult to pin down. It's slippery, elastic, resistant to precision. Moreover, it emerged at roughly the same time as theologies of liberation and political theology. Now, Marty defines public theology as, quote, an effort to interpret the life of a people in light of a transcendent reference, close quote. The Reformed theologian John Bolt argues that, quote, the purposes of a public theology is to provide a theological framework within which Christian citizens can conscientiously fashion their political vocation and interpret, evaluate, and transform the civic communities of which they are members, close quote. Sociologist of religion Linnell Cady, one of the few women engaged in public theology, describes its task as, quote, eliciting a recognition of and commitment to the common life within which we exist, close quote. At the same time, she argues for the, quote, appropriation of religious symbolism to nurture, deepen, and transform our obscured and damaged common life, not simply to propose a utopian communal vision, but to offer a constructive agenda that grows out of discernible features of our individual and corporate experience, close quote. Now, as I noted earlier, public theology appeared just after the eruption of theologies of liberation in the United States, including Black theology, feminist, womanist, Native American, Chicano or Mexican American, Latinx, Mujerista theologies, along with theologies of liberation in Latin America and in the country of South Africa. The provocation of political theologies in Europe should be noted, as well as, globally speaking, the instigation of theologies of enculturation and context. Public theology is not identical to any of these theologies, even though Stackhouse contends that political theology is its closest relative. Neither public nor political theology aims to generate Christian political parties or Christian voting blocs. Political theology, writes Dorota Sole, is rather a theological hermeneutic which holds open an horizon of interpretation in which politics is understood as the comprehensive and decisive sphere in which Christian truth should become praxis, close quote. Theologies of liberation also demand the liberation of those who are economically exploited and oppressed, those who, in the words of Gustavo Gutierrez, have no right to rights. In their critiques of Christian social praxis in history, theologies of liberation first uncover the ways in which the concept of private has been manipulated to sabotage our understanding of public and political. Second, decry the ways in which Christian life has been cordoned off from, set apart from local, national, and global socioeconomic mechanisms and historical dynamics. And third,
denounce the preaching of the gospel message as exclusively personal and conciliatory. To be sure, public theology has its shortcomings, and I'm going to set these aside, and perhaps we can get to those, but I will point out that it seems that nearly all of the early authors of public theology overlooked their own social location or social situatedness. These men gave little, if any, attention to their own gender, race, culture, and socioeconomic background. These early authors seem to have overlooked human particularity and differentiation within the actual living public within the body politic. This meant that these theologians either wrote the body politic in their own image or envisioned the public in abstract, homogeneous, and deracinated terms. When Pope Francis exhorts us academic theologians to leave our desks, to do theology from within the field hospital posted at the frontier, he reminds us that institutional Christianity, that the Catholic Church, has no exclusive claim on doing theology. Artists, poets, novelists, film directors do theology, do public theology. And the architects, organizers, demonstrators, and members of Black Lives Matter do and perform theology publicly in the public square. So the genesis and principles of a movement. What began as a word of love, written against the bleakness of death and the madness of anti-Black hate, has become incarnate in the body of a people, a movement. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Following George Zimmerman's 2013 acquittal in the shooting death of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin in Florida, activist and writer Alicia Garza posted on Facebook what she called a love letter to Black people. Garza explained the intent of her message to Olga Segura as, quote, a call to fight for a world that genuinely valued Black women, men, and children outside of their contributions to the entertainment industry, a world where racist men such as Zimmerman were no longer allowed to view Black children as unworthy of human life and dignity. This is now a global movement against systemic racism and public brutality. Garza's message was reshared by two other Black women, Patrice Cullors and Opal Tometi, then posted on social media with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. These three Black women gave life to a movement through their incarnation of radical love, hope, and faith. Their instigation of Black Lives Matter represents a sorely needed public option with and for marginalized, dispossessed, despised, and excluded Black human persons. Black Lives Matter is a fierce political and spiritual cry, a cry of presence from a position structured by invisibility, a cry of justice from a site rife with injustice, a cry of freedom in a condition of absurdity. Garza, Cullors, and Tometi define Black Lives Matter as, quote, an ideological and political intervention in a world where Black lives are systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. It is an affirmation, they write, of Black folks' contribution to this society, our humanity, and our resilience in the face of deadly oppression, close quote. The Black Lives Matter movement has expanded rapidly, broadly, and globally with independent but loosely affiliated chapters that insist not only on reforms, but on systemic and fundamental change. Even though the movement is commonly known as Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter Global Network is but one of dozens of organizations within a larger constellation of groups that fall under the umbrella Movement for Black Lives. Black Lives Matter's innovative grassroots organizing style builds upon and supports self-empowerment, decision-making, and liberatory action by Black people and those allied with them against anti-Black racist oppression. Black Lives Matter is founded and led by women, feminists. As historian Barbara Ransby points out, quote, the organizers have enacted a Black feminist intersectional praxis in the campaigns, documents, and vision of the major Black Lives Matter movement organizations. Ransby also makes two important observations. First, that, quote, this is the first time in the history of the US social movements that Black feminist politics have defined the frame for a multi-issue, Black-led mass struggle that did not primarily or exclusively focus on women. And second, quote, this movement has also patently rejected the hierarchical, heteropatriarchal politics of respectability and emphasized the needs of the most marginal and most maligned sectors of the Black community, close quote. This is really important. It's really important. A Black women leading a movement that is multi-issue, not primarily focusing on the needs and the concerns of women, but of all people, all people. The principles of the Black Lives Matter movement constitute a platform for a kind of Black humanism that struggles for the survival, liberation, and flourishing of Black human being as self and as subject. These principles include, to briefly summarize them, diversity as respect and celebration of difference and commonalities, recognition of a global African connectedness, along with critical sensitivity to the differentiated social locations of Black human beings around the world, commitment to demonstrate actively human regard and respect for all, and intentionally naming and embracing the presence and collaboration of transgender persons, gay and lesbian and queer persons, families and persons of different ages and different systems of belief or religions. Commitment to work to dismantle sexism, heterosexism, cisgender privilege, ableism, and ageism. Commitment to practices of restorative justice, a commitment to embody and practice justice, liberation, and peace, as well as empathy in all dealings with all others, and an unapologetic commitment to Black people, their freedom and right to live in justice. According to the African-American scholar Frank Leon Roberts of New York University, quote, Black Lives Matter's focus has been less about changing specific laws and more about fighting for a fundamental reordering of society wherein Black lives are free from systemic dehumanization. Still, the movement's measurable impact on the political and legal landscape is undeniable, close quote. Black Lives Matter remains controversial. In 2016, 3 years after its founding, the Pew Research Center conducted a survey that concluded 43% of all Americans polled favored the Black Lives Matter movement. After last year's murder of George Floyd, support for the movement surged to 61%. More recent surveys report a shift in attitude toward the movement. Even though mob-fueled destructive behaviors were neither sponsored nor endorsed by the movement, nonetheless, Black Lives Matter garnered intense reactions. Some Americans charged Black Lives Matter to be, quote, a terrorist group, close quote, and, quote, full Marxist, close quote. One Catholic priest labeled its members and demonstrators, quote, maggots and parasites, close quote. Another Catholic priest defended the movement as highly compatible with the Catholic tradition of finding the universal within the particular. One Catholic bishop declared that Black Lives Matter is in conflict with church teaching regarding marriage and family and the sanctity of life. Another Catholic bishop knelt in solidarity with protesters and declared, quote, "To say that Black lives matter is just another way of repeating something we in the United States seem to so often forget, that God has a special love for the forgotten and oppressed," close quote. In December of 2020, the Subcommittee on African American Affairs of the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops published on the USCCB website 4 reflections by African American Catholics on the expression Black Lives Matter. This was an effort to provide Catholics with some interpretive reflections about the movement. But it is important to point out that since the mid-1980s, Black Catholic Bishop Edward Braxton has been writing a series of pastoral letters and reflections under the rubric The Racial Divide. And in these occasional pieces, Braxton has explored the Black life world and addressed racism in society and church. So my thesis is that Black Lives Matter is a performative public theology, which through critique, organizing, advocacy, protest, and love, affirms and testifies to the lives and survival, flourishing, and beauty of Black human beings. To say that Black Lives Matter is a performative theology evokes the aesthetic, hence poetics. And with the word poetics, I mean exploration of the human powers to make, poiesis, a world in which we may poetically dwell. To create a social imaginary that makes and remakes our life world as beautiful, that discloses our human potential and the possibilities of living truth and justice. Thus, by reaching out and bringing together a humanly diverse public through organizing and protest, Black Lives Matter performs a poetics of imagining. Black Lives Matter imagines and forms a new public space for bodily, fleshly, and embodied, infleshed, connecting and touching, for speaking and listening, for conversation and interchange, for a range of healing and creative human actions. By imagining and envisioning this new social imaginary, Black Lives Matter reinterprets the idea and meaning of public. All of the children, youth, women, men, elders of every racial, cultural, ethnic, socioeconomic group who affiliate with Black Lives Matter, protests, principles, and demonstrations compose this new public. These children, youth, women, and men, and elders are not rendered abstract, homogeneous, or deracinated. This new public, as reinterpreted by Black Lives Matter, is not circumscribed by citizenship or immigration status, by particular forms of socioeconomic or political or religious or cultural or racial allegiance. Rather, Black Lives Matter imagines and facilitates a new public space into which all participants step and within which they too may imagine, embody in flesh, perform and enact what is required for the survival, quality of life, and human flourishing of each and every human life. What is required? Namely, the face, the presence, and selfless affirmation of another through fierce, compassionate solidarity. By locating the meaning of humanness, the meaning of human life in the protection of Black lives, Black Lives Matter repoliticizes our public life. Thus, Black Lives Matter restores us to a new meaning of politics as that inclusive horizon within which we comport and realize ourselves as human beings in history. This promotes a politics of inclusion and initiates groundwork for generating a potentially authentic common good. Participatory democracy, huh? Within this inclusive horizon, differences matter. How do they matter? No participant is required to discard or conceal their particular and differing experiences, perspectives, and affiliations. no one is colorblind. Within this space, children, youth, women, men, elders see one another as human beings. To put this in more explicit theological terms, each one sees the other as an icon of the divine transcendent one, as another human person made in the image and likeness of God. Such repoliticization calls not only for conscientization, but critical formation of conscience that is so necessary in sustaining a new social imaginary. Now, we recognize the term conscientization from the work of Brazilian educator Paulo Freire. Conscientization refers to the process of raising and attuning our awareness or consciousness to an issue or to a problem, to the process of coming to deeper, more complex understanding of how cultural, social, societal, even religious structures and institutions intersect and reinforce one another in order to maintain the cultural and societal reality in which we live. Conscientization occurs through questioning that reality and its construction, through probing and reflecting on answers discovered and uncovered. Moreover, it is vital to study, critique, dialogue, and debate those answers in order to clarify the ideologies that enable those structures and institutions. Now, I'm using ideology quite differently than the founders of Black Lives Matter do. So what do I mean by saying we want to clarify the ideologies that enable those structures and institutions? Well, that ideology allows those structures and institutions to appear to us as natural, as the logical conclusion of historical development, and as the way things have been, are, ought to be, and shall be for all eternity. Yet study and critique, dialogue and debate are not enough. The protracted persistence of any iniquitous system of living and the ideologies that support and defend it depend upon our inertia, our anxiety at questioning the norms, habits, symbols, and assumptions underlying institutions and structures, their rules, and the collective consequences of following or not those rules. These ideologies thrive on our fear to act, thrive on our anxiety at seizing the possibilities of personal and communal transformation and their consequences. But we must act, and act together. We must engage in praxis together, take up ongoing action and reflection and action. Now, conscientization requires critical self-reflection, and such self-reflection leads inevitably to the moral dimension of human consciousness, conscience. Conscience, we all know, look in the catechism, a judgment of reason whereby the human person recognizes the moral quality of a concrete act that they are going to perform, are in the process of performing, or have already completed. Yeah, it's committed, all right. Conscience concerns conduct, intentions, character with regard to a sense of obligation to do what is right. In order to perceive the directives of conscience, we must be sufficiently present to ourselves. Hence, cultivation of our own interiority. And interiority regards our exploration of the innermost depths of mind and heart. Interiority asks the question of conscience, who am I? And the answer is decisional action or performance or not. We ask and answer the question, who am I, with our very being, our very lives at pivotal moments of understanding, judging, valuing, deciding, and acting in accord with what we know, judge, value, and love. In this way, each of us embodies in fleshes at any given moment who and what we are. To stand with, to participate with, to affirm and support Black Lives Matter is a decision about who each of us is and who and what each of us is for. We may understand Black Lives Matter as reimagining public discourse as a poetics of testimony. So I want to spill that out just a minute. This poetics of testimony is characterized by three features: truth-telling, memory and mourning, and eliciting an ethical summons. A poetics of testimony critiques the ideology of dominant cultural practices and challenges how reality is both represented and generated through public discourse. A first characteristic of a poetics of testimony is truth-telling. The poet Mari Evans lived for 70 years in this very state of Indiana. One of her most famous poems from the collection, I Am a Black Woman, captures the demand of truth-telling. She writes, "Speak truth to the people, talk sense to the people, free them with reason, free them with honesty, free the people with love and courage and care for their being." The Black Lives Matter movement insists that if we are to experience and authentically enjoy freedom, then we must give testimony with and for the truth of the experience of the most marginalized Black human persons. In a society where many voices sound, yet public speech that is honest and empowering is rare, writes New Testament scholar Thomas Hoyt, people sorely need testimony. The idea of testimony draws from judicial and religious domains. In courtrooms, witnesses are expected under pain of severe penalty, even imprisonment, to speak truth when questioned. In some Black and in some free churches, testimony is part of the fabric of worship, part of the fabric of religious experience. Here is how Hoyt describes the pattern of testimony in a Black church. A believer describes what God has done in her life, in words both biblical and personal, and the hands of her friends clap in affirmation. Her individual speech thus becomes part of an affirmation that is shared, close quote. Testimony coalesces as a rich, robust tradition among African-descended peoples well prior to our marginalization and commodification during the time of enslavement in the United States. Indeed, during that period, enslaved people could not give legal testimony, and certainly not against any whites. They had no standing under most federal and state law except as merchandise or property to be bought, sold, or mortgaged. Thus, the enslaved people told the truth of their experience to the divine transcendent one, to God, and to one another, in prayer, in song, shout, storytelling, and preaching. In their testimony and prayer, the people narrated their suffering as they experienced it and lit the fire of hope as their sorrow psalms rose as incense to the absolute, compassionate, and merciful one, to God. Through a politics of testimony, Black Lives Matter speaks, witnesses, testifies to the truly true, the truth of the contemporary Black human condition. Through a poetics of testimony, Black Lives Matter contests those cover stories that conceal or excuse extrajudicial killings and unexplained deaths of Black and brown persons in police custody. Through a poetics of testimony, Black Lives Matter gives an account of the social suffering of Black human children, youth, women, and men. Secondly, a poetics of testimony functions as mourning and memory. During marches or demonstrations, Black Lives Matter organizers frequently chant the names of those who have died in police custody. Through the recitation of this litany of the murdered dead, a new and more authentic public mourns the loss of lives and life. The litany of the murdered dead honors and speaks the names of husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, uncles and aunts, nephews and nieces, cousins and fictive kin, lovers and friends. This litany gives back to the particular wounded Black family and community memories old and bittersweet, silly and joyful. Publicly speaking, the names of the murdered dead brings together concrete historical events and a recognition of the power of transcendence. Through incarnating mourning and remembering, a poetics of testimony pours out a healing balm and binds up psychic and spiritual wounds inflicted by structural violence, even as it reimagines and demands the seemingly impossible, the unity of the differing and differentiated peoples of the nation. Third, a poetics of testimony invokes an ethical summons to attend to the other in responsive and responsible ways, an ethical summons to love. As a poetics of testimony, Black Lives Matter imposes on our moral consciousness and evokes social responsibility. Black Lives Matter asserts that we are responsible to love, we are responsible to one another, we are responsible for one another. And on those marches, that responsibility is clear and concrete. We must speak and act for one another if we are to have any future at all. We must love one another, and love expresses itself concretely in option and action. It calls for the radical disposal of ourselves for, on behalf of, and with all those children, youth, women, and men whom society deems poor, marginalized, and despised. Black Lives Matter asserts that we are responsible to and for one another. We are responsible for the reality in which we live. I want to conclude. What is theology? In the widest, basic, most fundamental sense, theology is cognitive activity. It asks and answers questions about ultimate or transcendent meaning and value. At the same time, theology is an act of critical interpretation. It presupposes that there is something to be interpreted, something in need of interpretation, and that there is someone, other than yet including the theologian, to whom that interpretation may be directed. In other words, theology, or more properly, theologies, presuppose publics, presuppose communities. As critical interpretations, theologies anticipate and evoke responses, confront changed situations with new and pertinent questions and critiques. Further, all theology is public. All theology is contextual. All theology. It takes its questions, language, symbols, metaphors, analogies, and so on from particular historical, sociocultural, and religious contexts. And all theologies necessarily are tentative and probable, finite and limited human perspectives on problems and questions that can only have a divine solution. On these grounds, Black Lives Matter is a form of public theology. It seeks to understand, judge, and critically interpret the historical, political, economic, technological, cultural, or religious experiences and meanings generated by and pertinent to the Black human condition. Like other public theologies, Black Lives Matter seeks to influence public conversation, public dialogue, public debate, and public space. Those conversations, dialogues, and debates are in principle open to all citizens, all human beings who care for life, who care for Black life. As public theology, Black Lives Matter has developed a discourse and a performative portfolio of actions, demonstrations, and protests. As public theology, Black Lives Matter has provided intellectual and sociocultural space,
in which those who seek their own human integrity and who are committed to preserve and protect the human integrity of others may strategically engage in networks of thinking and planning, sharing the bread of experience and drinking the wine of struggle, acting for life. In the words of James Baldwin, Black Lives Matter is compelled, indeed, to attack and condemn, but out of the most passionate love, hoping to make the kingdom new, to make it honorable and worthy of life. As a public theology, Black Lives Matter aims to address the cognitive, ethical, psychic, personal, and communal transformation of Black children, youth, women, and men. In their effort to achieve this goal, this public theology, in principle, seeks to transform all human beings in some recognizable personal, social, political, ethical, cultural, or religious way in order to bring about in this, our country, authentic social transformation. Now, Byron began by talking about a teacher, but a teacher always talks about the students. And I'm coming to the last few sentences, but I want to give a shout out to all my students who are here, especially the BC contingent and the Emory contingent. A shout out to all of them. And I want to conclude with, and the IBCS, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. And I want to end with this story about a former student of mine from Yale. The Reverend Dr. Shannon Craigo-Snell, professor of theology at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, recounted her participation in a Black Lives Matter protest with students in October 2014. So busloads of seminarians and clergy and professors all arrived. They walked with marchers who were shouting, "Show me what democracy looks like." The response, "This is what democracy looks like." One of her students, now an ordained Presbyterian pastor at the Independence Presbyterian Church in Independence, Ohio, whose name is David Weiger, said, "Can't we replace that word democracy with theology?" So Craigo-Snell asked the activist leader, could theology replace the word? She writes, the activist was skeptical that the crowd wouldn't understand. But like every determined teacher, she pleaded for her student. And the leader handed her the microphone and she shouted, "Show me what theology looks like." And the crowd of clergy and the rest of the people all said, "This is what theology looks like." Black Lives Matter is what theology looks like. Yeah, we have time for a few questions or comments. You just want to go drink wine. I know you people. You're so constantly Catholic, you know.
I just wanted to thank you for your great presentation. I have a comment and a question. My comment is, it was wonderful. I hope the Black Catholics hear it. I hope the educators hear it. I hope the bishops hear it. Because Black Catholic parishes matter.
Yeah.
Black Catholic schools matter.
Yes.
For a seed to grow, you must water it,
Yes.
not crush it.
That's right.
Evangelization, critical race theory, telling the truth, being like it is, the absolute truth. That will keep us going. And when we have ownership, when we could teach Black Catholic histories in our schools, our seminaries, great universities like the University of Notre Dame, like Boston College, and like all the rest, to show that we matter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Junior Hopwood, and I don't know if I'm the only sociologist in the room, but as you were speaking, and I recognized the power of what you're saying and the potential of what you're saying, and the sociologist in me is that, why is it not happening? And the problem is that persons who have benefited from the system is so comfortable with the system that there's no motivation to change the system.
Yeah.
And any attempt to change the system is met with resistance.
Yeah.
And so I see where a way of bringing about this resistance is those with power who has the power to label a problem, as labeled the Black Lives Matter movement a problem. And I seek flimsy evidence to justify that labeling in order for it to stick and to discredit that movement. And I think the challenge for us is to find a way to bring about that consciousness. You know, I've always felt that, you know, rich people who feel that they need all this amount of money and not realizing it's a want, is not realizing that if they give up some of this money, the amount of security that they have to pay for, they wouldn't have to pay for it, because if they invested it in the community would protect them. And I think it's the same thing that we see over and over again, that those who have held on to a system that has benefited them is fearful of the change because they don't know what it looks like. And I think it's a challenge for us to find a way of bringing that consciousness to the fore, to say that it doesn't mean, you know, you're going to be in a worse position.
Yeah.
Like I've always said, in order to tackle poverty, we first must tackle wealth. And I think we've always been going about it the wrong way. We've been trying to solve poverty, but we have never tried to solve the issue of wealth.
Yeah, well, we have, huh? That's very important. Thank you. Thank you. I don't mean to cut you off. Yeah. Yes, and we have somebody in the United States who's trying out of Catholic social teaching to remind us that we have to pay our fair share, huh? We have somebody here trying to enact Catholic social teaching. Huh? Maybe not in this room, but in some room, somewhere.
Hello, Dr. Copeland. Oh, sorry. You want to go? Good. Good.
Vanessa White, Catholic Theological Union at Chicago, as well as Xavier University of Louisiana. It's a question and a comment. And it's also a challenge to those who are educators, who are faculty here at Notre Dame and at other schools. We need to begin to decenter whiteness in our classrooms. We can no longer have the black course. We still need the black, so it's a both and. We still need the black course, and we need the Latino course, and we need all those other courses. But in those courses that are considered the normative theology courses, we need, as faculty, and I challenge those who are faculty, to decenter whiteness so that you don't have just one black author, and it's the same black author and the same text that you've had for the past 5 years. I'm speaking out of an experience of being a member of 2 different schools. Yeah. And students will say to me, they're surprised, well, why isn't this course have the C designation as culture? Because you have a lot of you have a diverse reading list. You have diversity in who we're learning about. And I said, that's how all courses should be here at this institution, not just this particular course. So that's the challenge that I want to make, because then we truly can say Black Lives Matter. We can truly say that all lives matter.
Yeah.
But until we do that, then we're just speaking empty words out of our mouths, and we're not following it with action. So thank you.
Yeah, no argument there. You both of you have really important points. I mean, these are important points for us as educators. We can't probably really take credit, but I must say I was deeply moved by seeing so many diverse young people during the George Floyd protests. So many diverse young people. And what came to me is that means then that they got something out of Chicano or Chicana studies, out of Mexican-American studies. They got something out of Africana studies. They got something out of Latinx studies. They got something out of Asian studies. They got something out of that they could recognize other human beings and that they could respond and move and act. We can't, as teachers, take complete credit for that. But we have to, as Dr. White brought up, we have to really provide them with the opportunity to think new possibilities. Huh?
Hello, Dr. Copeland. So my question...
And you are?
Oh, sorry. I'm Craig Ford at St. Norbert College, BC alum. My question... That is important.
Yes, it is. Especially in this place.
Dr. Copeland may have been on my dissertation committee. Okay. So, I know she was.
I just weep at football games, that's all.
Yeah. So, my question really comes out of the last story that you told, really about the protest and the skepticism that the organizer had around theology being a word for people to wrap their cries for justice around. So as I look at the landscape of U.S. religion and sort of the disaffiliation that people have from institutional forms of Christianity, I'm curious to just hear your comment on the secularity of the Black Lives Matter movement, or not. I mean, in the sense of, I think there's a challenge or a prophecy about the future of what movements for justice look like, and I'm curious for your thoughts around how Christianity, as it changes, is either looks at Black Lives Matter as something to embrace or to be challenged by, or to wonder about. What sort of attitude, as Christianity, as America secularizes, should we as Christian thinkers, thinking about the future of our traditions? What does Black Lives Matter mean for that?
Right.
Thank you.
That's a really complex question, and while the organizers, the founders themselves, have some religious backgrounds that are differing, what's also true is that even the sort of modern civil rights movement, there were churches who were afraid to get involved with Martin Luther King Jr. Black and non-black Christian churches. And the way some stories are told, that one Lutheran pastor only got involved because his congregants were all black, and so they just kind of stood up and said, But look at that, think about that, in the sense that people, this is the politics of respectability. I'm not criticizing people, it's really hard because we've so typed black people as, it's Fanon, huh? The wretched of the earth. And in that sense, he's of course trying to subvert this meaning, but we're stuck in it. And so only if you're wretched can we deal with you as black. And so once you put on your tie and your jacket and your spiffy new dress from whoever, and you're all cleaned up, yeah, exactly. Or you have on your Roman collar, or your other collar, huh? You got it.
then we can deal with you, but otherwise we're not really so sure. And then we're going to bring you into the status quo. I mean, one of the things I wanted to try to talk about, but there's not really time, is to talk about a politics of love. Bell Hooks is really into her love, you know, and the practice of love. But that practice of love means different things for us. You know, it means different things for people of color than it means for white people. And we have to love ourselves enough to resist and not be seduced, really not be seduced by what's out there, because it's coming. And white people have to learn to love themselves, to convert to their humanity. To convert to their humanity. It's like, it's what, you know, it's what Shug says, get that off your eyeballs, you know? So I think, there are all sorts of efforts to try to get us to pay attention differently, and that people in churches are involved and can see, you know, because we've built up a little ground over the last 50 years. You know, I mean, since 1968, we've built up some ground, and people have a sense, some people have looked at themselves and they've made changes in their lives. So we have to figure this out, but I'm not so caught up in the secularity of it all. I really am not. Because you're aiming for something transcendent. You know, that's what you're aiming for. You know, and I think well, that's what I think for right. That's provisional, huh? That's provisional. We can think about it more over the weekend, you know, a little bit, you know, yeah.
Catherine Osborne. My question also takes off.
Are you, just tell us where you're from.
South Bend now.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a PhD from Fordham. Yeah.
The lone voice cries out. That was bad.
I got my maroon on, you know, I'm representing. My question also takes off from the last anecdote you told about the protest, and I was wondering if you might speak a little bit about Black Lives Matter as public liturgy as well as public theology and performance.
Well, it is that, isn't it? It is that. It's a ritual performance of a litany, huh? And it's composed. Sadly, you know, it doesn't have an end, does it? Doesn't have an end, and that's what's sad, you know. I think one of my illusions, of course, is sharing the bread of experience and drinking the wine of struggle so that we can act. So that we can act. And I think the action is not only in being in the march, but it's also in somewhere else in doing something. Okay. Well, two more questions. Is that it? Okay. That's where the act is. We have to act. And part of the act is also a conversion of ourselves, a continual conversion. You know, it's a continual conversion, you know. And so in terms of respectability, not to be caught up in, you know, getting something, being able to let go, to face the cost of discipleship, if you will. Because that's what's at stake here in the end for the religious person. You know, Jesus isn't inquiring on everybody's religious faith. I mean, he's really connecting with people. You know, I mean, he knows who's out there. He knows they're all Jewish people. He's got all that, you know. But there are other people who are around who make their way to him. And what he's responding to is the openness of heart and mind. You know, the openness of heart and mind. Yeah. Okay, all right.
Hi, I'm Mary. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Is that okay for now? Okay.
I'm Mary. I'm from St. Louis, just moved here to South Bend. I'm also a writer, so I loved what you said about the poetics of just like a lived experience. It reminded me of, you know, and the word was God, and
yeah.
I'm bunking it now because I'm a little nervous.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay because it is, yes.
Yeah. So what you just said about scales falling from the eyes, that was literally the exact visceral experience I had with, as a white person last year, when George Floyd was murdered, any vestiges, whatever it was, it was like the curtains got ripped away. I kept coming back to that image. And this past year has been both an experience of awe at how people who are oppressed have been, I mean, historically, all of that, how God comes through the strongest through that, but also at the same time, the most heartbreaking thing, seeing white people not give a shit. And it really, I mean, your work has been referenced for many people and books and things that I've read, but what have you found is most effective in making people give a damn? Because I don't have the answer. I know you probably don't have the answer. We'd have change if it was, but what have you found is effective? Because it breaks my heart and I'm tired of.
Yeah, I'm sure, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking here that, you know, remember, not only black people died in the civil rights movement, but also white people and Jewish people, huh?
Yeah.
Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman, huh? Huh? You have someone Jewish, someone Catholic, someone Protestant, you know? I mean, so there's Viola Louisa, who gets in her car from Detroit and drives to help people, leaving behind husband and children. I think we're afraid to answer the call, you know? So yeah, it hurts to see people, but not give a shit. But the thing is that happened, opened up so many people. That's what we have to be. Nobody's grateful for anybody's death, but that somehow the conditions under which we saw that, if we hadn't been locked up at home and annoyed, you know, then we would never have seen that.
COVID allowed the things that were already simmering to explode into the privileged public consciousness, I think, you know?
And if that little 17-year-old had not filmed that, if she had not been surrounded by black and Latinx and white people standing there, they could have taken that camera. We would never know this. We would never know this. Because there are hundreds of stories we don't know. We don't know. You know, the thing, I don't know what to tell you to do. If you're a religious person, you have to pray. That's what I do, huh? I mean, and then you work hard. You work hard, you know. Here, you know, it's like you work as if everything depended on you, and you pray as if everything depended on God.
I love that quote.
And it does, you know. But it only depends on God if we are open, you know. I mean, yeah. Okay, all right, so, okay.
Hi, Dr. Copeland. I'm Trisha Kuzno. I just graduated from Candler, and I'm a pastor in South Bend at Grace United Methodist Church.
Who was in our Zoom course when I was visiting.
I had the privilege of taking a class, so literally I'm going to ask another question that I think I asked 10,000 times in class. See if you have an answer this time.
It's hard being a teacher.
So in previous conversations, we've talked a lot about how the church doesn't teach theology, specifically specific contextual theology, such as Black theology and Latin theologies and Emerita of theologies, and the list goes on and on and on. We only learn about the white guys in church, amen. So my question really derives from that last story about what does theology look like? And I'm really curious from a systematic standpoint as well as from a practical theology, public theology standpoint, what it looks like to take social movements into our congregations and what that actually looks like to teach theology in the church, because I don't think I can lecture my congregants. I could try, but what does it look like to bring those public theologies into the sacred, if we are going to use that distinction? I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, here's your concern about lived religion, as we love that rubric now, huh?
Yeah.
But it's also true. It's also true that people can discover in our conversations. You talked this morning when we visited about these 9 women, you know.
And you told the story of the woman who said, wow, if Jesus had healed Herod's withered hand on the Sabbath, it would have been very different. And that was so insightful. But you gave her an opportunity. And that's what we have to give each other, opportunities. We have to give each other opportunities. And I think that's, to me, that's basically what we can do. You know, an opportunity to read, an opportunity to hear even a page. It doesn't have to be a whole chapter. It can be, we can do that. And I think that's the way. Small little 15-minute, conversations about theology over a period of time can be so helpful for people in pews. And that's us also, huh?
Yeah.
Because if you're doing theology, you should be going to church, huh? I'm not going to call you all New York Times liberal reading people. I'm just going to,
Sorry, Dr. Copeland, Mr. Stiles gave me the nod to ask him 3 questions.
Okay.
Sorry,
This is our last one for the night.
Yeah. Will Peterson, founder and president of Modern Catholic Pilgrim, a nonprofit that's based out of Minneapolis that puts together walk pilgrimages here in the United States, including pilgrimages for racial justice. Bishop Braxton spoke at our keynote last year in Louisville. We have Dr. Bello speaking this year, and we look forward to having you in a future year. Yeah.
There she is.
So I have a dear friend who actually works here at this university, and then I just actually got a text, I think yesterday, from a dear friend back in Minneapolis who is a student at within the Catholic Studies Department at University of St. Thomas in the Center for Catholic Studies. And both have, she talked about the department there dealing with it, and my friend talked about it just as a Catholic himself. There's, that wonderment of like, why engage with Black Lives Matter as theology and in dealing with, racial justice and understanding and life, as opposed to diving into the Catholic social tradition. Mm-hmm. And there's people who have hesitancy around this, and so I'd be interested to hear, and what do we share with these people, just to help them to understand kind of when they have these struggles. Thank you.
That's another good question, our last question, and that is this. I mean, quite honestly, I've tried for a long time to make Catholic social teaching answer the question of racism, and it doesn't. The people who've tried to answer that question inside the tradition have been Black Catholics, mostly, and Mexican-American Catholics, then Latinx Catholics, a little genealogy here, and yes, womanist Catholics. Let's not mujeristas, we're all going. But I'm saying this to say that if the major ethical figures in our tradition don't address the issue, no one will. There are a few people who have started. I'm thinking of major figures, okay? I mean, we have there's a line in Hollenbach in an essay he writes. He says, racism is tolerance cannot solve that problem, and it can't. But we need to know more about that. Now, he's got a different agenda. It's okay, but where is that going to take us? Keenan has a long article in Theological Studies from a few months ago, working through a lot of literature to try to help us understand. But in terms of major Catholic social ethicists, it's not on their agenda. Dan Horan, who is not a Catholic social ethicist, has written a book entitled, What White Catholics Need to Know About Racism, I mean, this is a great thing, but it's a sad thing, because why can't the white Catholics read, caste and get it? And I think it's because we like to compartmentalize. So you pass a law and they can go to the school. Okay, fine, all right. And we move on and we do our thing. We forget that somebody comes along and undoes the law that just got passed. We don't need any monitoring on our voting rights. We're all good. We just changed the law, We got rid of it. It's not necessary. And so what do we do to people? But that's not our affair, because I'm going to Mass every Sunday.
And I'm so good, I even remember the 9 First Fridays and do them. I mean, there's a way in which we've separated our religion out of life. And that's on us. We can't teach religion like it's something you do over there while all this is going on over here. Christianity is a way of life. Jesus taught a way. Jesus taught a way. He answered lots of questions that people asked him. He was teaching a way to be in the world, to honor God and other human beings. And that's nerve-wracking because there's no right answer. You can't put that in the catechism. You can't codify it. Not because we have situational ethics, but because the person without voting rights is different in their needs than the person who has them and has taken them for granted. Has nothing to ask, nothing to worry about. Why are you worried? This is the United States of America. That's why we're worried. That's why we're worried.
So I don't have a question, and I know you all were wondering, well, why is she still standing there when Dr. Copeland said the other one was the last question? But I have been told that the bar opened now 11 minutes ago, and that it would only be open for 1 hour, and so you are into your hour.
Okay, before you go, though, we're not going to make this long, but we just want to, again, thank you, Dr. Copeland, for your informative, relevant, and prophetic talk on this evening. As has been said, that there is a reception over at the tent. We invite you to go for more conversation. I don't know, is the book sale still going on, or did they leave? Oh, they're going to be in the tent. So everything is over at the tent. So please follow Dr. Copeland and everyone else over to the tent.